Hey, thanks so much for joining today's session. This is Alex Assaley with AFS. Hope everyone's having a good week so far, and we're excited to present today's program with JLL on reoccupying the workplace. So over the course of the last several months, we've all been operating in a really unique and certainly challenging period where many companies and employees are looking to understand the ideas and best practices for returning to the workplace in the safest and most productive way to do that. So today we're joined by JLL to help this discussion. Adam Cook, Amanda Rosenthal, and Joe Judge will be presenting their knowledge, insight, and advice around reentering or reoccupying the workplace. JLL is a leading professional services firm that specializes in real estate and a Fortune 500 company. They have operations throughout the world in over 80 countries with over 93,000 employees. So they've been a great partner for us at AFS. We're really excited to have them share some of their expertise today that they've been sharing with us over the course of the last year plus and advising us with our office space. So it's my pleasure to introduce Joe Judge, the leader of their tenant advisory practice in Washington, D.C., to get us started.
Great, Alex, thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be with everyone today. I think we would all agree that attending a call on returning to work was not on our calendars for the fall, but our team is really excited to share the insights and information that is focused around how our clients are indeed returning to the office, sharing benchmarks and helping you communicate in a seamless fashion back to your teams on what's most important to your organization specifically. And I want to make sure on the visibility, are we on the speaker slide right now? Alex, do you see the speaker slide?
You're on the COVID experience slide right now.
Okay, great. So I don't see that slide on my screen, but I will make sure I have it up. So this slide specifically, everyone, this is a slide that our team generated at the beginning of COVID, and you can see it has indeed been a journey. Many of us would agree when this all happened 6 months ago, many of us went through all of those stages, disbelief, denial, shock. Once it started to set in, we realized we needed to take some action, put a plan in place, respond specifically to this pandemic for our organization, for our team, and scale, and figure out how we can be most productive in these environments. And no matter who you are, your world looks much different today than it did 6 months ago, maybe even 3 months ago. And we're all processing this information in various ways. But the key ingredient in what we're here to talk about today in any successful strategy is communication. And I think we would also all realize that there's no silver bullet solution to this pandemic, to reoccupying the workplace in a pre-vaccine environment. But there's many ways we can seek to minimize risk in the workplace. And it's up to each organization to determine their comfort level, which is appropriate for your organization and for your company culture. So today we look towards the next normal. We look towards reimagining a new workplace. We look towards implementing a new vision with specific percentages of employees that are allowed back in the office based upon local government mandates, depending upon where you are around the country. And we look towards what we can control as we look to communicate a strategy that will ultimately bring confidence and ideally a sense of calm to your organizations as we all experience this together. Adam?
Brilliant. Adam Cook here as well. I want to thank everyone for joining today. you know, as we talk about COVID-19 and the reentry into workplace, the conversation continues to evolve. We've been having these conversations since Q1 of this year, and now we find ourselves nearing Q4. Three main common areas of focus are most common in the dialogues that we're having with groups like the ones participating in today's call. One, what is the thing that we should be doing right now to make sure that our reentry is the safest possible reentry protocol? Two, we want to know, what are others like us doing? What is the marketplace? There's no published rule book, guidelines, standards, or legal compliance manual for which we must comply with, but what are the best in class doing? What is benchmarking doing for reentry? And finally, what should I be doing to help my organization not just get through reentry, but really reimagine the future of work? So we were talking as a panelist team prior to everyone joining simply about, you know, what are major workforces and major employers out there doing? Are they planning on maintaining their portfolios, growing their portfolios? How will this great experience and experiment in work from home and productivity change the way we work and change the purpose of workplace as we move forward? So for today's conversation, we really want to focus on answering these key themes. And we invite anyone, if you have questions, please feel free to add them to the comment or chat thread as you see fit. And we'll make sure we hold enough time at the end to really dive into these questions as they pertain to each of your organizations. So let me walk through a moment. Let's begin with that first question. What can we do now to ensure the safest possible reentry for our workplaces, for our employees? So first off and foremost, different people are on different paths of this journey with reentry. There are some people that have gone, you know, progressively far beyond they needed to at this point, and they're well prepared for reentry. There are some people who are still dipping their toe in and aren't sure what they're planning to do yet because their organizations really don't have a wide-reaching reentry strategy until 2021. What I want to do is remind people that no matter where you are on in your journey, it's not that difficult to go from what I call 0 to 60 quickly. So while most people have done several things like you'll see on this list, such as surveying your employees to know what are the parameters under which they can re-enter, preparing socially distanced work plans, auditing your offices, writing policies, and helping to train your employees on coming back to work, probably you haven't completed everything on this list. And if you haven't even begun it, we have a plan in place where you can really go from 0 to 60 in about 6 weeks. So the good news is, if you haven't begun yet, it is not a difficult task to get your organization really up to industry leading in a matter of 6 weeks, pending you follow a really prescribed plan to help you get there. So our first tip is make sure you're aligning to a really clear reentry roadmap. And of course, if anyone would like us to share samples of that, we're happy to share the slide deck from today and any illustrative examples to help you along on your own reentry journeys for your own employees. The second thing that we encourage people to do at this point in time is it's really a great time to be reaching out to your landlords, your property management teams. We imagine most people are in a situation where they are a tenant in a building that does not belong to them. If you are not in that situation, this might not pertain to you, but you might need to still use this strategy with your own buildings if you own them or are the dominant tenant. But now is a great time to reach out and understand what is your landlord and your property management team doing for you. Oftentimes we find that they are communicating to tenants, but they are doing really the bare minimum. They don't know what action or step to take. So we've devised just a checklist so that tenants can work with their landlords to really understand, do they have a best-in-class response to providing a safe building for reentry, focusing on clean air, building security, water and plumbing, and finally process and protocols for addressing and dealing with COVID cases, contact tracing, etc. Our third tip is really more about modifying the workplace through behavioral change rather than investing in expensive physical changes to the workplace. So a lot of people come to me and they're very concerned about modifying workstations, installing barriers, and doing a lot of things that cost a lot of money and eventually will likely be reversed and have to be undone, also creating a lot of waste. What I am here to tell you is there is no physical silver bullet. You cannot spend enough money to make any space completely COVID safe. And really the safest and most effective thing we can do is teach people behavior modification so that when they return to space, they're behaving in a way in which protects them and protects others. That is infinitely more successful and more beneficial in preventing the transference of COVID and frankly, any other communicable diseases. Furthermore, many states are now making re-entry training a requirement for organizations upon re-entry. Locally in the Mid-Atlantic, Virginia is one of those states, and we see many more states signing on board with legal requirements for training that complies with CDC as well as OSHA guidelines for employee safety. So that's something that you're looking for. Again, we're helping many organizations plan those re-entry strategies and training, and make sure that you incorporate that into your re-entry strategies, please. And the last tip I want to leave you with for really creating healthy spaces, and this is for people that have essential workforces. These are maybe places and environments where socially distancing or the nature of the work doesn't allow for us to always protect ourselves in the best way possible. And certainly in this arena, this area of the US, we have a lot of government contractor employees who actually have some government contracts that require this, but really progressive employers and employers with large populations of essential workforces are leaning in towards more rapid testing protocols. So there's several partners we work with, but one in particular is a group called Carbon Health that offers on-site rapid testing, meaning 15-minute testing, as well as mail to your home testing. So employees can take a test and, whether that's once on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, but really understand their status before being admitted to any office or location. The other thing that I will put out there, I work with several chief health officers for very large organizations from groups like Marriott, CVS Health, et cetera. And one of the most interesting things that I've learned about recently is CVS Health is tracking a commercially viable home test. So you or I could easily go and purchase a test. They've actually compared it to a pregnancy test in the nature of ease and how it can expedite your results. And this will allow people to actually test themselves at home. So as we're seeing the availability of testing increasing dramatically, one area we're seeing really employers of choice lean towards is more testing scenarios. So I'm gonna pause for a second. Those are really our 4 top tips for re-entry planning and making your environments as safe as possible. We're gonna keep moving here. But first I'm gonna turn it back over to my colleagues, Joe and Amanda, to give you a view of the landscape of how major organizations are planning to re-enter their own offices.
Thanks, Adam. So many times during this crisis, we are asked on behalf of our clients, what are you seeing in the industry? Can you provide some benchmarks? And we find that the tech companies, Google, Facebook, others seem to get a lot of attention in the press, and I think we find our clients seek comfort in their peer group, in their industry, in their sector. By way of example, in Washington, D.C., where we sit, the association and nonprofit sector is a very large demographic of our population here, and with their annual events not being possible, the virtual nature and the reality, funding is not what was anticipated at all. And so what we're doing is taking a much closer look into those organizations, into their business plans, and into what they're thinking, and bringing that up. They specifically don't know if they're going to be coming back anytime soon as a sector. When you look at the household names, Apple, Amazon, American Express, others, you can see in the date of this poll is also very important, in that it was as of August, just a few weeks ago. Dramatically different tenors and postures at the beginning of COVID versus a post-Labor Day attitude that we've seen, as the fall has a psychology, has a return to work type of mindset, and we're seeing more people focus in on when they will be coming back to work. But this is an important metric that we track across all industries to give people kind of comfort and confidence of what their peer group is doing.
When we look at benchmarking, go ahead, Amanda.
Sorry, good afternoon. This is Amanda Rosenthal. Joe, one thing I'll just add is that I think what this slide truly shows us is just how truly segmented reentry really is. And one thing we've been hearing from our clients that are on sort of the far left side of that chart is that remote work is absolutely fine for coders and programmers, but remote work really limits their employees who work as part of a team on more of a daily basis, and that they really need that collaboration to share ideas and keep that productivity high.
Great. And as we benchmark the overall re-entry strategy of major organizations, I'll add on to what Amanda just mentioned. We work with a lot of groups in, particularly in the Bethesda area that are in the hospitality sector, retailers, things of that nature. All of these industries that have large workforces out there serving people in space, hotels, businesses, retail, et cetera, they're wanting to bring their workforces back to their offices as well sooner rather than later, both in a show of solidarity, but also specifically to what Amanda said, these are really team sports, these industries, and having those teams be able to play on their home turf together is really essential for the culture and the productivity. As we look at benchmarking strategies, it's not just about when people are coming back in force, but it's also about how we're preparing the space in which people are working in. So one of the things I wanted to highlight on today's call for everyone, and really using some case studies recently that we've helped our own clients with in our own backyard here, is how folks are benchmarking and why organizations are seeking benchmarking. And again, I go back to that notion that there's no rule book here. No one's telling us precisely what we have to do to prepare for reentry. There are some guidelines and some requirements, but there's no hard and fast infinite checklist that we must check off before reentering. So I want to share a few stories with you. First, our friends at a Delaware-based financial services firm, they were really progressive. They own their own building, have a large property team, and were really first and forward about making changes to their property in an effort to bring people back to work. They sought benchmarking because they really wanted executive leadership to have the confidence that their strategy for reentry was on par with other competitors in their industry. They want to make sure they're an employer of choice. They know that their workforce is valuable to them and they can lose them to other like-minded and locally based organizations. So they really wanted to make sure in their push to bring people back to work, they weren't losing potential talent, and that they were really proving to their leadership and to their employee base that they had a best-in-class response to COVID. And we'll show you what that looked like in a second here. The second example I want to share with you again is a Bethesda-based retail firm. Because they have so many people in their stores working to serve customers, corporate leadership really felt that it was essential for them to bring back people to their corporate offices as quickly as possible in mass to show that solidarity and to further foster that team collaboration. So they really wanted to benchmark themselves against other similar organizations in retail, hospitality, and consumer product goods companies to make sure what they were doing was, again, on par with the industry. And last but not least, we have people looking towards the future. So we're working with a major hospitality firm that is building a new headquarters building currently in Maryland. And the building is still going as planned. There's no stopping that railroad, but we did stop and look at the design to assess it for readiness for a future pandemic. And one of the things that we looked to help everyone gain confidence is we couldn't quite predict what pandemics might be looming out there. The only thing we could say was there certainly were risks for future pandemics, similar or different in transmission features. So for them, we used an external benchmarking system. But how this played out for each of these groups, one you can see with the first scenario, the company wanted to benchmark itself against its competitive set in the industry, really from the standpoint of, are we best in class and are we supporting our employees equal to or greater than our competitive set would do so. A second group really just wanted a measurement against their own best in class physical property modifications to make sure they were doing everything essentially that they could. They really do want to do everything. They just can't afford to do everything. So they're really jockeying to do the things that gain them the most benefit for preserving the health and wellness of their employees. And last but not least, for that future headquarters project, we benchmarked them not only against COVID standards, but we really relied on outside metrics from the Well Building Institute and an organization called Fitwell, both organizations which help us as building occupiers understand how to promote and build wellness and healthy decision-making within inside our workplaces. So again, I would encourage you, if you're looking to step out of the box of what you know from your own organization and learn and compare yourself to what others that are similar or perhaps dissimilar from you are doing in their response, we're really happy to share some of these scenarios with you and even connect you with other folks that might be a little bit ahead of you in their planning processes so that you can share best ideas with your peers in the industry. The last
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Joe.
And just really to reinforce on a couple key points, and really it's a point Amanda had made earlier. When we look at the spectrum of time, and you can see on the far left here, February of 2020, what the physical occupancy level percentages were across the United States of the office space, it averaged 92%. No surprise, when COVID occurred in March, it dropped dramatically to the 2% level. And we find ourselves now in the September timeframe where we are now increasing to the 10 to 15% range, depending upon what jurisdiction you are across the country. And when a lot of our clients are looking really over the horizon, some have made very specific statements that they will not be returning to the office this year, or they will be allowing those that feel comfortable, that would like to come back. They're preparing for that to occur this calendar year. But it's really, as you can see, come January 2021, a much more dramatic pickup as it relates to people's plans to return. And this is a byproduct across all industry sectors as we see really a return to normalcy at the end of next year. And this is a survey instrument that we conduct quarterly. And so we're, again, happy to share results across all industry verticals as confidence continues to grow or developments with the vaccine occur. As we prepare for the future of work, it's really now, knowledge is power to a certain extent. We think knowledge with action is even better. So how are we going to prepare, and what are we doing to take next steps? I think a big part of that is understanding, we've talked a lot about surveys, understanding the composition of your team, understanding what they like about being in the office, and candidly what they don't like about being in the office. I think we can all relate to features and benefits of working from home versus things that we missed being in the office. And again, we've surveyed lots of our clients, and the results probably won't surprise you. If we go to the next slide, a dominant share of our clients really miss the interaction with their colleagues. I know I can say, the daily routine is a bit different now. I'm the father of 2 young children, and my workday is a bit different, but it's been such a joy this past 6 months being much closer to them on a day-to-day basis. With that, though, our time at work has changed pretty dramatically. There is not a work-life balance as we had before. It is pretty much, all encompassing. You're working and you're living and you're doing all the things that you've done at home, and you're probably now just getting the hang of things. But this really gets a baseline associated with where your team is. And every organization, as we've emphasized, is different. The culture of your organization is different. And it's a really good baseline to commence your discussions around where do we go from here, and how do we maximize productivity and health and wellness as a team.
And what gets really interesting when we start to deep dive into some of the demographics are looking at the different segmentations of our workforce for some millennials, Generation X, et cetera. What we're really learning is there's some really clear dissonance between more advanced, members of our workforce versus newer members that are just entering the workforce or newer in their careers, and the need basis of those different demographic groups evolves. If you focus more on that under 35s category, and you kind of go to the middle of the chart on this page, what you'll see is the younger members of the workforce, members of that millennial organization, are really focusing more on the physical attributes of what the space gives them. And that might be for many reasons, right? Some of them might not be homeowners yet. We now know more than ever, people to an advanced age are living at home in multi-generational households. So maybe they just don't have the place to work, the space to work, and the tools available. But it's funny, as we see the more advanced work generations focusing on the social, the collaboration, and the people aspects as being their #1 driver and a dominant driver, bringing them back to the workplace and creating that desire to return to work as quickly as it is possible to do so. And really, it's those physical attributes. Our younger workforce do need the space. So what we're learning is, well, they are probably more equipped to be digital nomads and be efficient and productive no matter where they're working, from home, from the coffee shop, from the bus stop, et cetera, because of that nomad nature and the multi-generational situation that many of them are finding themselves in. They need a place to go. They need a place to set down some roots. They need a place where they can focus and really harness their energies to be productive for the organizations in which they are a part of. So it's really interesting how the demographic seismic shift is going more and more towards younger members of our workforces needing a home base, a mecca, an office, so to speak. As we do that, I work with many people and coach them on how has our need for space changed as a result of everything that we're experiencing with COVID. I think we know a few things to be true no matter what organization you're in. With this great work from home experiment that has been very successful and very productive for most organizations out there, there's still this desire to bring people back, but to capture these new ways of working. And what we're learning on average is that most of the population just wants more choice and more flexibility. So while I don't think, long-term in the future, we're always going to need to do things like take temperature screenings and wear masks, there is a new emphasis on health and wellness. And whether that's just achieving a healthy or wellness building certification, institutionalizing policy, or physically dedicating space to wellness, whether that's isolation rooms, sick rooms, or meditation rooms, focus rooms, relaxation rooms, things of that nature are starting to become more important and really a key driver in some of the design decision-making for future offices that we see out there. The second thing may become self-evident, but it might not be aware of how we implement it in space. So the idea that all organizations need at some level to respond to this work from anywhere calling is a given. It doesn't matter who you are or what you are. At some level, every organization has to be prepared to address this question, even if it's just in preparation for a future pandemic situation. But those work from home policies create the need for different spaces and different ways to service the space in which we work. And that might manifest itself into different areas, such as tech desks that are more like Apple stores. I like to call a space in offices we're working on now called the digital nomad mudroom, but really a storage place where those people that aren't in the office every day can leave things behind, even though they're not going to the same dedicated workstation every day. And finally, a clean desk policy. So no matter where you're sitting, there's going to be a desk if you reserve it, and it's going to be clean and safe and ready and waiting for you. There's also a lot of forward-leaning technologies required to support that, whether it's direct technologies that people engage with, or whether it's passive monitoring technologies to make sure people are being compliant and using the space correctly, making sure the space retains its healthy, functioning design status. The collaboration call is going to be greater than ever before. With more people working remotely, home office becomes that mecca where people come to onboard. They come for purpose, they come for missions, they come for training, they come to socialize. So how do we build both formal and informal collaboration? How do we incorporate food service? How do we incorporate clean air and wellness? And how do we build these spaces so that they're modular and help workforces do what they need to get done? And that doesn't just stand for large collaboration space, but also down into individual workstations and smaller collaboration space. And so this idea of neighborhood or cellular design is having a resurgence as we look at how do we design spaces that are flexible, protect our people, but also allow work to happen with people in the same physical space. And last but not least, in this day and age, we can't design an office that is not smart and forward-looking. So office monitoring, reservation systems, and just smart tools that allow the office to work for us, not just have us work in the office, are really essential on a forward-looking next generation office strategy. So I encourage you, as you focus on your next normal, take those 6 design ideas and ideas in which we use space and blend them with these 3 priorities. So one is really understanding the workflow and workforce. How are people working? What are the trends of work? And what do people really need to do their jobs well? We get a lot of questions on how do you measure productivity when people aren't in the workforce? How do others do it? And my answer to that always is, forget about how others do it. There's going to be a right way for you to do it, and it's going to be very dissimilar from how others do it, I guarantee you. So let's talk about what productivity means in your organization and what the culture of your organization is. Do you have high trust or low trust? What type of work do you do, etc.? The second is this blend of a digital and physical workplace. And one thing that I preach is, in 2020 and beyond, we are 2 people. We are our physical presence, which we see, and we're also our digital presence. Whether that's through social media or the work we do in collaboration and online tools, we have 2 existences in this day and age. And as you're planning for the future of work, you really need to plan to accommodate both the digital and the physical person, because those things both take up space in some regard. And we need to plan for how do those spaces and those workflows work together. And finally, last but not least, how do you really use your real estate portfolio more strategically now? Are you able to reduce your office footprint and save money on things like rent while still driving collaboration? Are you able to monetize assets that you own if you're a government or a local owner or an owner of your own building? But what are the ways that you can really look to real estate, not just as a large cost on your balance sheet, but in today's age, re-weaponizing that portfolio to actually maybe revenue producing for you and not just a cost center?
Thank you, Adam. And everyone, we'd like to thank you all for giving us your time. It's your most precious commodity, and we take it very seriously. And we hope you found this session valuable. We would love to hear from you. Any questions that we typically ask of our clients or have asked, and would love to hear your thoughts on where you are on your reentry journey. Specifically on a percentage basis, and who plans on returning. Do you think your organization is doing enough from a health and wellness perspective? And what percentage of your employees are approaching you, asking you, we want to come back, when can we come back? How many of you are providing kits to your team, have made investments and have a communication and change management strategy? And based upon the city or county that you occupy, what are the dynamics that you see in the options that you're providing your team? So you can see there's a common theme here. It's all about choice, and this is not a prescription. It's not required. And when we think about liability, when we think about safety, there's, as we sit here in September, there's not much that's different than where we were in March, other than our comfort level, what we've done, changes that we've made to our lifestyle. I would venture to guess that most of us have gone to the grocery store over the last 6 months. We've taken a calculated risk. We've worn the masks, we've worn gloves, we've maybe taken the gloves off, and everybody has generated a certain comfort level on what you feel is an appropriate path for you and your family. And this is really about your organization and making people feel safe and ensuring that your organization can continue to be productive, and making sure that looking ahead, as we obviously all anxiously await a vaccine, not knowing when that's going to happen, how we can take action and put a plan in place and ensure your team has that confidence and comfort level as leaders of your organizations that you are driving this organization forward with the leadership and the knowledge and the action that's needed in a very competitive environment. So with that, Alex, we'll hand it back off to you and your team, and we welcome the opportunity to field any questions.
Joe, there were a couple questions that came in. I'll read them to you and we can address them. So the first one that came through is, and I'll probably field this one, are there any concerns about legal liability for a company if upon re-entry their employees contract the virus? So let me take that one, because I've actually been working with an organization called RICS, which is the Global Organization for Risk Compliance Officers. And I've actually been leading the RICS organization through their own response to COVID-19. And it is a great question. Back in June to July, we saw a 300% increase in employee class action lawsuits against employers based, and that number was driven by lawsuits that were based around re-entry requirements. Basically, employers requiring people to come to work to do their jobs, and employee groups, organizations, individuals not feeling that A, it was necessary, and B, that their employer was making it safe for them to do so. Now, a lot of those lawsuits are through unionized workforces. So, I'll caveat that if you're not working with unionized work sources, you are probably at a lower risk of that. The answer is yes, there is a risk there. And I think there's really two key areas that you need to focus on. There are many more, but the two high-level ones are, one, you need to do re-entry training and set an expectation of how behavior change has to happen. And why I say this is essential is because, as I mentioned previously, several states are now mandating that in their laws, that training, which must hit certain training topics that the CDC and OSHA have outlined for us, that training must happen. Virginia is one of those states, as I mentioned. More states are joining that bandwagon every day. The second thing that I think you need to do is you always need to plan it out. There always needs to be an option for an employee to self-nominate that they cannot return to work. And that might mean that they're ineligible to do their job in some circumstances, and there needs to be a policy and a protocol for addressing that. There are some other risks around thermal scanning. Thermal scanning is subject to ADA and other laws regarding HIPAA and patient privacy information. So make sure if you're doing thermal scanning that you're doing it correctly. If you need advice on the topic, I'm happy to offer some advice. Baker and McKenzie, a law firm, also has a great white paper I can share with you. So yes, there absolutely are legal liabilities. They are worse with a unionized workforce as far as the level of incidence or risk of those liabilities. But for the most part, they're very easy to skirt by simply providing training, one, and providing an option for employees to opt out, two. The next question we had, and Joe, this might be one for you and Amanda, is can we explain more about the ROI of your leased space and what we mean by that? And I think that came out of my comment about, is there a way to turn real estate from a cost center on your balance sheet and convert it into a revenue generator, or frankly reduce your cost? Joe, Amanda, I know you create those solutions every day for our clients, so perhaps one of you can speak to that.
Sure, happy to address it, and Amanda, I welcome your thoughts as well. So our clients have a diversity of portfolios from owned and lease assets. And in this age, the owned assets are being evaluated. There could be higher and better uses. There are revenue streams that can be generated in just straight sales. From a leasing perspective, it's really, as Adam indicated, a reevaluation of our new normal, understanding, do we need as much space as we had before? Some are saying less, some are saying more. Being very specific to the social distancing aspect, we really have seen quite the pendulum of the workplace over the past 5 to 10 years, from everybody being in an office intensive environment to the pendulum swinging to a heavily cubicle open work environment, to now really the balance between both in what we call a one size fits one, where it's really a functional benefit of how we're defining collaboration, transparency, and privacy. And privacy may be acoustical privacy as it relates to how you work. You just need to be able to focus. And so it's an office intensive environment, but it's all glass walls. And now as we look ahead, monetizing that and getting an ROI and understanding, can we relieve some of these obligations more oftentimes than not? The second highest line item on our books. Now's the time our clients are investigating that and determining how much they can save, or if they're actually reinvesting in the space to get the ROI, to get their team back to work, depending upon where you are in those survey instruments.
Perfect, thank you. Amanda, is there anything you wanted to add to that? Otherwise, there's a couple more questions I can post.
Yes, thank you, Joe. I think you said it perfectly. The only thing I would add is that, as scary as this time has been in so many ways for all of us and for our clients, it's also really an opportunity to better our space and better our working environment. And one of those ways is just getting more efficient with your space and potentially taking less space as well, which helps on the ROI, of course.
Great. Our next question is, we have employees asking about reentry, but we're unsure of an appropriate timeline. What's a good, simple plan for small employers under 50 people to keep employees up to date without committing to a timeline? So one, I think, this is where benchmarking really does come in handy, because I think the benchmarking is really in your favor. And if you show employees something like this, which, shows them that most of the world isn't taking any dramatic steps for reentry until next calendar year, what I would say in your instance, and what I've heard other similar firms of 50 people or less say, is listen, we're not asking people to return this calendar year. We will re-examine returning to the office in 2021. We will not ask anyone to return to the office or open an office without at least providing 60 days notice. So that policy seems to be a very good policy, particularly for smaller organizations. It allows them time to sit and wait and figure this out, while also gives their workforce peace of mind that they'll continue through status quo at least through the year, and they'll have enough time to make changements to their daily schedules, given 2 months lead time before returning to the office. Now, I'll say that should be tempered with two things. One, if there are people that want to return to the office sooner, do you have an opportunity to do a small pilot reentry, or let even a few people, 2, 3, 4, 5, have intermediate access to the office? I do have some clients who are doing programs like that, and I'm happy to talk offline if anyone should be interested about how they're facilitating those programs. I think generally a lot of people are standing by no major action during the 2021 calendar year, and we will give you up to 30 or 60 days notice upon re-entering in the new year. We do have another question that's come through. This question is really more of an HR or legal question in its own admission of the individual asking it, but this individual is asking what protection exists for the employer if an employee is non-compliant, i.e. if you have an employee who is not wearing a mask. So this is actually, you're right, it is a legal question. And unfortunately, employment law is usually at the state level, so this will vary based on the state that you're in. I will say recently, I have seen a lawsuit in Texas, of all places, where a employee was asked to leave because they weren't wearing a mask, and they are saying that it is a violation of their civil rights. And it appears that even in the court of law in Texas, they are siding more with the business than the individual. And I think in these cases, while it's not specifically prescribed, it is a state-by-state legal question, but predominantly, even in those states that seem to lean a little more towards the rights of individuals and are less, how we say, inclined to comply with CDC guidelines, even in those states, they seem to err on the side of the organization and the health and wellness of all others. So that is something you will have to explore on a state-by-state basis with your own counsel. But from a policy standpoint, an organization is free to write its policies and free to enforce those policies in a way they see fit. That of course should be run through your counsel, but generally I've not had many clients who have had difficulty enforcing those policies. We have had people forget, we have had people mistakenly not doing it, but we don't have many instances of people belligerently not participating or not complying with those requirements. And upon a warning, employees usually fall into line. So that will require more exploration, but hopefully you don't have that type of dissent in your workforce. Here's a question for you, Joe and Amanda. Are you advising clients on going back and renegotiating their current leases?
Yeah, it's a question that we're getting a lot, is everyone can appreciate. So at the beginning of COVID, there was a surge of requests by our clients, the tenants that we advise, specific to the rent relief that owners were apparently giving out to the masses. What ended up being obviously the case was the retail demographic was the recipient, and rightfully so, of the majority of these rent deferment and rent relief benefits. And we have JLL, as Alex introduced, we're a global firm. We have many verticals and specialties, one of which is property management. And there's 500 million square feet of management that we have. And based upon the analytics studied of that period specifically, we had 500 requests of tenants that indicated that they were seeking relief, that proved that they were they required rent deferment in order to stabilize the business. And across the board, across dozens and dozens of owners, no more than 3 months were provided. And I bring that up because we are now at a different stage of the COVID cycle, where a lot of our clients that may not have participated in that initial inquiry now are getting a much better perspective specific to what their next normal looks like. And the time horizon that you have and are comfortable with is really predicated upon the negotiation. If you are a customer in a building that has visibility into the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, then you are at a competitive advantage in the marketplace right now. Over 90% of the transactions that have occurred in the last 6 months have been 1 to 2 year extensions. And obviously owners of buildings prefer a much more secure cash flow time horizon. And so subject to your ability to have clarity around what your core requirements are, we would encourage that discussion based upon current market dynamics. But we would also caution that the market is still very dynamic, still very volatile. In the Washington, D.C. marketplace specifically, we have over 3 million square feet of sublease space that has been added to the market since COVID started, and it was averaging about 50,000 square feet per week. So if you have time and you're not in a hurry, don't think you're going to miss out on the deal of the century. We feel if you're patient over the coming months and quarters, the market's going to continue to come to you. But if it's something that requires immediate attention and you'll benefit from the savings effective immediately, now is also a very good time to have that discussion.
And Joe, perhaps you were reading ahead, and maybe Amanda, you have point of view on this as well. Another question came in about the strength of the commercial market in the DC area. I think you kind of spoke to that, but specifically, is the market retracting? Do we think we'll see rental rates decrease? And is JLL as a firm preparing for a downturn in commercial real estate?
Yeah, I didn't see the question, but again, it's a great question, and I'd love Amanda's feedback on this. The stability of our region has always been very well supported by the federal government. The good news is we've really received quite a bit of balance over the past few years. Obviously, Amazon's HQ2 moving to the region. We have a very stable technology demographic in our region, but the reality is we're still very much supported by the federal government. The opposite side of that is we're also heavy with the law firm sector. We're heavy with the association and nonprofit sector. In those industries specifically, we have seen the most movement in regard to how they are going to be working going forward. There are very senior partners in law firms that have no interest in coming back to the office. They find themselves very productive and able to do their work. And law firms tend to occupy very expensive real estate, and that's an immediate ROI back to those partners by kind of downshifting those actions. I had alluded to our association and nonprofit clients earlier with a major vehicle of revenue being an annual conference. Rethinking what that virtual world looks like is really reshaping the way they're occupying their space. But as we think about the market as a whole, we do feel there will be a dip. This is a very resilient market that is supported by phenomenal labor in a part of the country that has a diverse platform of service lines. It's not the case in other parts of the country. So we're bullish on the marketplace, but we do feel we will not really get back to any state of equilibrium until the better part of late 2021. Amanda, anything to add to that?
Yes, and I would also just add that there are also some sectors that have really flourished because of this, which you'd hate to say is a direct correlation with COVID, but sectors such as government contracting and life sciences, this has really been a time for them to grow and expand. And so I think as a whole, as Joe alluded to, I think the DC market area will remain strong, and we do anticipate we'll see continued growth in those industries.
Awesome. Amanda, Joe, and Adam, thank you so much for all of your input, your presentation, and the great responses. If there are any other questions from our audience today, please feel free to either type your question in, as everybody has been doing so far, or if you'd want to ask a question, we can unmute your line. You could raise your hand on the GoToWebinar dashboard. There's a little button on that dashboard that allows you to raise your hand, and we can unmute your line. So we will be providing the presentation. I know there have been a number of questions that people who have asked about that. We'll be sending this presentation over to the attendees. JLL has graciously allowed us to do that. And I know just from our own perspective, as I was listening along, there are a number of good strategies and notes that I was taking down. So again, we'll hang on the line here just for a few more minutes for any final questions that come in. But really appreciate the questions so far and from the JLL team, all of your insight thus far.
I think as we're kind of vamping here to see if there is a final question and closing up the meeting, Adam here, one final thought that I really want to leave people with, and Joe and Amanda and I speak about this all the time, is there's no silver bullet. There's no perfect response to this is really what we mean by that. But we are definitely aware that prior to COVID, there was a war for great talent. And I think what we're seeing are really the best and brightest companies continuing and understanding that they can make progressive leaps forward in that war for talent and the way in which they respond to COVID. and really because that's a repositioning of the culture and the protocols of how you work. So not only was this the world's greatest experiment in remote working, which from that standpoint turned out to be a successful experiment, this is also the world's greatest wake-up call in refocusing on how employers prioritize and plan to be an employer of choice to attract the best and brightest talent, and really how we use space and wellness as tools in that battle. So I'm sure everyone on this call has heard or read or seen information relative to the battle for talent and, you know, changing demographics and workforces and focusing on mental health and physical health and things of that nature. But this is our calling card. This is the time to rise and really put a stake in the ground about what your organization is going to do in response to that, and have a profound answer to that question, because you're going to need to answer it. Today is the wake-up call if you have not prepared to answer that yet. We do have one final question, it looks like here, and the question is, what's the best method for redesigning space upon an in-office move or lease renewable? What about mid-lease? So it all depends on where you're at in your lease, and then Joe and Amanda, I think you'll talk about this, whether you have an option to terminate, an option to renew it, and what your personal situation is. It might even make sense. In some situations, we've had clients to pay to get out of leases because that was the right answer for them. But so I think there's really two questions here. It's about, you need to understand where you are in your lease term and what your organization is poised to do. Is it going to grow? Is your space requirement going to decrease dramatically because you are going to institutionalize a wide work from home policy? So the first thing is, sit down with someone who can advise you and really understand where you're at in your lease commitment, and ask the right questions of you from your workforce. What is that workforce going to do and change and look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And then from there, you know, we personally have really quick visualization tools. In about 20 minutes, we can take answers from a few questions and tell you what kind of space you need and how that space will be divided in between dedicated workstations, drop-in workstations, collaboration space, restrooms, you know, storage, etc. So the tools we have using artificial intelligence and machine learning to really process, you know, different responses to those questions allow us to, within, you know, a half hour or less, really map out a programming and tell you how much space do you really need and what will that space look like. So, you know, we're happy to have that dialogue with anyone who's interested in having it. Joe, Amanda, anything you'd like to say as a closing thought or in response to that?
Adam, I agree. It's depending upon where you are in the life cycle of your lease. If you've just signed a new lease, if you're in the midst of it or at the end, it's really understanding what you need over what period of time. There's an array of alternatives. There's catalogs and catalogs of choices. We would, recommend you not make significant investments that are so unique that you don't have the exit in mind. We really like to establish some guiding principles around what the key priorities are. If it's health and wellness, and there's areas to invest in touchless technology, in a socially distanced floor plan, in a communications campaign where you have your poster boards and other areas, there are low cost measures that can really address this. If it's more of a significant investment on how you work and you want to leverage capital from the ownership, obviously there's a vehicle to negotiate a new lease and get the majority of those improvements funded by the ownership. But again, it really gets back to the guiding principles of what you're trying to accomplish and over what specific period of time. And then we can mix and match very flexible investments that can cater to what you're trying to achieve.
All right. We at JLL just want to thank AFS for having us. We value you as a partner. We value you for trusting us with your valued partners. And again, we'll make the information we provided today available. This is not a profit center for us. We are not looking to make money off of COVID. Any questions you have, please send to us. We just want people to come back to work and come back to work safely. And we are more than happy to share any knowledge base we've gained in this. You know, we brought back hundreds of thousands of organizations, hundreds to thousands of organizations over billions of square feet. We have taken learnings from Asia Pacific's reentry, from Europe's reentry, and from different markets in the US and how they've been reentering, including our own workforce population across our offices in the US. So let us help you. We are happy to share what we know and collaborate with your organization for success and a healthy future. Thank you.
Excellent, Adam. Thank you so much for that. And Joe and Amanda, thank you as well for today's presentation. We really appreciate it. It's been an excellent overview of what's happening and what we anticipate the work environment will look like moving forward. So if there are any additional questions, we'll make sure to get them over to you. But until then, hope everyone has a great rest of their afternoon and week. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks again to the JLL team. If there's anything else that we can do to help, please feel free to reach out to the team at AFS, and we look forward to speaking with you soon. Take care.